Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights. We're going to learn new tricks and hear from industry experts. I'm your host, Chris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on November 6th, 2023. Chris. Learning new insights. We're always back. We never go anywhere. How can you say we're back? Back in the chair. I'm still trying to get this chair set up. Obviously, you can see. So I'm standing. I'm not even in the chair. So I'm in the Dynamics Corner.
You are in the corner without a chair.
Yes, I'm in the corner without the chair. Another great episode, as all episodes are. In this episode, we had the opportunity to have a return guest who was able to speak with us about intercompany transfers, what's new in Wave 2 of 2023, and some of the features and functionality of intercompany transfers. With us today, we have long prefix, Amanda Mayer.
Apologies.
Ready? Take.
Did you hit your hand on the fan?
That was the ceiling fan.
Dude.
Brad.
Oh, that's staying, man.
Are you bleeding?
Ready? Take two. I'll put my arms up there again.
Wow.
Don't do that.
Wow. I forgot that was there and on. Thank you.
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
It was. Now I don't even know what we're doing. It's Amanda Beating.
Yeah.
AKA Amanda. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
It's been a whirlwind the past couple of weeks, but I went from Summit to another week of travel, so it's been kind of crazy.
Oh, Summit was intense on its own. There was a lot of content.
Summit was intense on its own, yes.
And then to follow up with some additional travel must have been a little crazy.
Mm-hmm. So you were nonstop? Like you didn't even go home or anything? You just kind of went out or went home for a short moment and then off?
Well, I didn't go home. I went back to Chicago so I could make a practice and then flew back out of Chicago. Because remember, I'm out of Milwaukee. So it wasn't worth the drive back home, but I did stop by so I could hit a practice because we had our last tournament, then the following weekend.
So for those that are listening that don't know, Amanda, aka Demanda Beating, plays roller derby. So I'm assuming that your reference to practice,
yes,
was a roller derby practice.
Yeah, it was a Chicago roller derby practice, and now we're done with travel teams for this season. So
did you have a championship, you said?
It was just a tournament, so not a bracketed tournament. So we played 3 games against 3 other teams.
Nice.
That's interesting. I'm still impressed by that. I need to do something. Instead, I just had some cookies and some puffs while we were waiting for you.
I had Doritos before here.
I had some Tootsie Rolls while I was getting ready for this. So,
see, too bad I couldn't cue the song because that would be pretty good.
Tootsie Roll? I should have given you a heads up on that.
Yes, you could have. And now I don't know if I'll be able to use my left hand for a little while. So that may be a little awkward.
No. Do you think that everybody who listens to your podcast is old enough to know that song?
I would assume so.
I think that is one of those timeless classics, as I refer to it.
A timeless classic?
It is funny because I think now they consider music from the 80s as the classics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's when you start hearing music that you grew up with, it just reminded me when people used to like music in the 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
It's like
or
classic.
even 90s now. 90s are considered classic.
Yes.
Yeah, they're new oldies. But,
I think anybody who listens would know, and maybe they could Google the Tootsie Roll song. And
they could.
Hear it.
In my past life, both of my analysts were millennials, substantially younger than me, like on the younger end of that. And sometimes when I would swing by their cubicles, we'd have conversations about music, and I would like make them Google music that I would reference because they didn't know, and then watch the music video.
Yeah, I could go down this road a lot. I have a lot of stories
I
about
mean, you
different
guys share
generations
the
in
music.
music.
Yeah.
I think I think people live through music and they may not realize it. I heard
Yeah.
one time somebody talk about how your emotion is driven by the music. Like when you're happy and upbeat or whatever, also you listen to the music. When you're
Yeah.
depressed and sad, you listen to the words or something. It's like some sort of
Oh,
correlation that. And then there's also some songs that if you listen to the beat, that the beat is upbeat. But if you took the moment to listen to the words,
they're
they were
frightening.
they're very sad and
Yeah.
melancholy and frightening. It's funny. Listen to the words to the songs you like.
Well,
They may
like
have a good beat.
Pumped Up Kicks is a really good example of that, right? I don't remember the name of it, but it sounds very upbeat, but it's basically about a school shooting or shooting someone over their shoes or something like that. It's
That's crazy.
Yeah, I remember the song. I don't remember the word. I remember the gist of it. I don't remember exactly the song.
The lyrics, yeah.
The concept.
But it does have kind of like an upbeat feel to it.
Yes. And speaking of Summit, did you did anybody here win any awards at Summit?
Well, I did. I did.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. I am now a legend.
Yay.
It was not the last time we chatted, but I am now, yes.
Nice.
Well, congratulations on that.
MVP
well
legend, Amanda.
Now you're an MVP legend. MVP, you can't be forever. Legends, you're always a legend.
Always a legend.
Oh, you're all-star too, aren't you?
I am one of the originals.
Legend all-star. All-star legend.
An all-star legend MVP. Can you be an all-star forever too?
Yes.
All-star forever,
the all-star is a forever designation. It's basically just the MVP that you have to keep working for.
Wow. Which ones mean the most then? Is it the MVP that means the most? Do you get more from it?
I mean, in terms of global recognition, probably, right? Because it's a Microsoft award when it comes down to it. And there are a lot of people that utilize Business Central that are not a part of the Dynamics communities. So that's where the legends and the all-stars are really focused in versus MVP, which is globally recognized because it's a Microsoft award.
Well, congratulations on all three. Well deserved.
Thank you.
And now that we know you're a legend, I am humbled that you're
all-star
taking the time.
Legend.
An all-star legend MVP. I'm humbled for you to take the time to speak with us. But in all seriousness, I'm very appreciative for you to take the time to speak with us because there's some things I wanted to talk with you about, if you remember. But before...
Okay.
We already know you're an all-star legend MVP, but for those who may not know you, but I'm sure everybody must because of your status, both on the rink and off the rink. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a director in the Dynamics practice of LID Consultants. We are headquartered out of Montreal, but we have offices in the US and Korea as well. But I started my career as an end user, and I started using Business Central, which was Nav at the time, in 2008. And I found myself, as soon as I found the user group, I found myself connecting with people to ask questions that I couldn't solve for myself because I needed support. And I think eventually we'll get to some of that aspect when we talk about new functionality. But I had to really create a community of my own to be able to do that and learn on my own aspects of the system that weren't really well known either. And in 2017, I moved into the consulting side of things. And since then have been helping with training, implementation, support, things like that, and doing speaking engagements as well.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much for that. LID Consulting. How do you like being a consultant versus working for an end user?
How do I like it? I like it. I mean, part of the reason that I decided to go into consulting was because I wanted to be able to share my knowledge at a faster and higher rate than I could do as an end user. because I realized as an end user that there was so much unknown at the time. And while Microsoft has done a good job of continuously increasing the efficacy of Microsoft Learn, it still is only based on functionality, right? Like the system can do X. And what a lot of people need and a lot of businesses need is the combination of the functionality and operations. And I like to provide that. And I like to get the opportunity to talk to people about their businesses and guide them in implementing the system and utilizing it to benefit their business, not just as a software that you push buttons on.
No, it is. I think it is good. There is a big difference between working for an end user and a customer. I've done both. I think you have to have a certain personality to do both, to be honest. I don't think everybody can be a consultant, nor can everybody work for an end user.
I agree.
I think everybody has a role that fits them within this space, which is great. And the community seems to be getting closer between the two, which is
blurring the lines.
I don't know if it's blurring the lines, but I think there's a lot more collaboration and open sharing between. It used to just be the partners, for example, that were into all of the sharing and the newness of the application, and the customers were laggers in that. But now with a lot of the advances in technology, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of podcasts, blogs, there's Demanda, reference, learn. Like there's a lot of avenues available for people to share as well as learn information. So it's great. So one thing that I wanted to ask you about, if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You're ready. So Business Central has 2 annual waves, as they call it, right? So we have 2023 wave 1, 2023 wave 2, and there's always newness in there. So we'll put you on the spot as a controller consultant.
Yeah.
There's some new features that were recently introduced with intercompany transfers.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk with us a little bit about that, because I know intercompany transfer is one thing that a lot of businesses use, and they sometimes have difficulty setting it up, the whole file inbox, this, that, the other thing. But what are some of the recent changes that were made with the intercompany posting? Or transactions.
Even if you go back, like why would you, or when do you use intercompany?
Thank you, Chris. My finger injury threw off my brain, so I think I'll have to.
So I'm really glad that you asked me that, because as an end user, that was one of the areas that there wasn't a lot of information about. And I was the corporate controller for a business that had, when I left, 40 entities worldwide. And we were starting to implement into the business operations in the US, and they did a lot of transactions between each other. So that was, in fact, one of the areas that I had to start learning kind of on my own. And the intercompany functionality has been in the product for a very long time. But starting in 2002, Microsoft really started pushing more improvements into the product. It sat kind of where it was for a very long time. And it started in 2022 when they started, it might have actually even been earlier, where you could start auto-accepting transactions between the two entities. And keep in mind, at this point, we were all still in the same database/environment, meaning you could have a company that had to buy something from another company. So there would be a purchase order to a sales order to a sales invoice to a purchase invoice. And the system handled all of that, except that everything got stuck in an outbox or an inbox, and then you would have to go take a look at it and accept it. And so before the 2022 auto-acceptive journals, they had already been updating that to allow auto-acceptance of documents, meaning sales documents and purchase documents, trying to reduce the number of clicks that someone had to do.
I remember doing many customizations to auto post intercompany transactions.
Auto posting, and like even before the auto posting, a lot of people did have to do developments, because they're like, we do all of these transactions. I can't have someone sitting monitoring an outbox or an inbox just to push things, it kind of defeats the purpose. It will take just as much time for them to enter it manually into the system. So that was the improvement. And then in 2022, they implemented the auto accept of journals. It does require you to have just a single batch to do that. But again, everything then flows through. And now you just need to know that your open documents and open journals need to be reviewed. They still do require the action of posting, but most businesses have a business requirement for evaluating what that is before they actually post it, right?
Reviewing
in a
of the
journal, they might
journals,
want to change the dimensions. In a sales order, they might not have availability, so they have to go back and forth with the quantities available and stuff like that. So it's reasonable to create the document but not post it. So then in 2023, they've actually continued to build on that, and they redesigned all of the intercompany setup. If you had more than 2 or 3 companies, the intercompany setup itself could be quite burdensome, because you essentially would have to go into every single company and set up all of the chart of accounts and dimensions, assuming that there were dimensions that you were passing between them. And they now included a sync, so you could have basically a master of what that intercompany should be. And when we get into like global business, or even just within a same region, multiple businesses, it's really important that if a company can do things like a common chart of accounts or a global chart of accounts and dimensions and things like that, that it makes their processes easier. But what you'll find is if you're in a company that comes with a lot of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, they might not have that ability to have that common chart of accounts or dimensions. And so they have to have this core piece that they can then pass information back and forth. So they've really improved the setup to make that faster, which is great for entities that have more than 2 or 3, and they want to pass those across all of them.
That took a decade?
It took well, that was 2023. Like that hasn't been, more than, because intercompany has been in there forever.
Intercompany's been there since way back in the 4.0
Since way back. Yeah. And you would just have to go through all of these. I mean, it's not surprising that they did this, because wasn't it 2023 that we got the master data sync as well? Yes. So they kind of like did both of these things at the same time. Like, oh, maybe people don't want to do all of this from scratch every single time. And you can have up to 300 companies in the environment. So
I think automating as much as possible with having the checks and balances or the controls are important.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions on intercompany within Business Central.
Well, let me finish telling you about then the Wave 2 updates, and then we can go into any
2023 Wave 2, which just was released back at the beginning of October at the time of this record. Well, it was released at the beginning of October, just released at the time of this recording.
And they just unpaused the updates.
Yeah. That was today. I saw that note.
Today.
Yes, today they unpaused the updates to version 23 Wave 2. 2023 Wave 2, version 23.
So
I will never understand that.
Why they pause it and then?
No, well, they pause it every time.
Every time. Why not just give yourself more time?
Well, I don't think they need more time. I do understand they've gone through their cases and tests, but they've probably had some impacts to tenants that, for whatever reason, with different data sets possibly, or maybe some other type of setup that throws it amok. I was just talking about, I will say every time, the numbers. Like it's 2023 Wave 2 is version 23. 2023 Wave 1 is version 22.
It's 22, yes.
So that gets confusing, because now I'm saying I'm on version 20. What am I really on?
It should be 23.5, right? Wave 2.
Well, no. Well, 23.5
I'm saying if they synchronize it.
Like they should,
they synchronize it.
And they should go back to the years numbering, right? Then it would be a lot easier. 23.
Well, why don't we just call it 23 and then have the monthly updates and just forget calling it a wave, and just, because the waves get rolled out monthly anyway.
Well, but the waves, the monthly ones are more hot fixes. Like in the old terminology,
That's the old news. Now they add functionality. If you pay attention to
they
the open
spread it
source
out.
contribution,
Yeah, they do. They add functionality, but I feel like the functionality that they add in those monthly ones are like smaller pieces of functionality.
Oh, yes. But 2023 wave 2 gets waved in over a 6-month period. So everything that they release will be in 2023
Fair.
wave 2
Yes.
is not out when they release it. There's a
Fair.
schedule of when it's going to be released. So therefore, a feature that's announced in October may not get rolled out until January. My point is, why don't we just have 23.1, 23.2, and this is what's coming in, and say this is what we're going to do over the next 6 months.
Yep.
That's fair.
It doesn't need to be
fair.
a 22 or 23 type number. And then the year can be the number, 23.
And then the year can be the
23.
number. That's fair. I hope Microsoft is listening to this, because we've clearly just solved all of their release wave problems.
At this point,
it just makes sense.
The way they've evolved the release schedule, at this point, it does make sense to stop with having major number increases for every wave, because the wave itself is not a big release, because not all of the features are released.
Yep.
How much of that, though, is to that not all of them are released, but some of them go immediately into preview, so you could turn it on if you wanted to?
I think it varies. Feature? I mean, the preview sometimes come out of...
the feature management, right? But some of that is related to the release waves, and they make it available, they just don't push it.
Sometimes, though, there's a date there where it says, like, oh, it's FY 2024, but then you can do it now. And some of them have been there for a while.
Scheduled, and then you could work with what it is. This is what I'm saying. So just go back to 2020. I mean, we could stop messing around here. It's just like we could stop changing the names every day, too. These are the things I'll say every single episode.
Oh, let's not get into all of the poor choices in the naming of this product over the last 5 years. Okay. I mean, that's a whole nother, conversation. But the other big kind of intercompany related things that happened in this fall release, 2023 release 2, AKA 23.
Now she put in fall release. So now we have the fall release, 2023 Wave 2, and version 23 from the All-Star Legend MVP. So we have to listen.
Exactly. Hashtag all the things. So they've continued to expand on this, and also have listened to the fact that customers may not have all of their entities in the same environments. So think about like localizations or acquisitions and things like that. So they're not necessarily, or companies that are on-prem and SaaS. So they've, you can now do intercompany transactions across environments. So they've given you the ability to set up your intercompany partners as partners that exist in different environments. So think about that too, is that you could potentially expand your intercompany functionality to not just your own entities, but maybe companies that you do a lot of business with.
Other tenants outside of you.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to ask, when you say environment, what do you mean by environment? Because is it an environment in your tenant, or can you synchronize intercompany data across the tenants?
So I believe it specifically states environments in the data. I have not yet tested tenant versus environment specific to this functionality.
See, sometimes there's a play on words there.
There is, absolutely. They also give us the ability to do approvals and intercompany journals. So a few years ago, they added, workflows and added in the regular journal approvals. And so now they've brought that into the intercompany journals. And then they've also brought in the ability, this is not specifically just intercompany, but it often goes hand in hand with intercompany. And that's the ability to consolidate across environments. So if you're a business that has multiple entities, you are likely also having to consolidate those financial reports into a single or multiple consolidation companies. And that was something that in the past, much like intercompany, you could create a file that would be exported and imported, or use the file server location or an email for all of those functions. But now they're giving you more direct access to those across environments.
So It does say that you can connect with partners in another tenant or environment. So, yeah.
So until I see it, though, I won't believe it. No.
Well, if they document it, it's for true, right? That's true, right?
No, it is. Yeah, yeah. It should be. Although you say that, and I spent the last, I don't know, when did the intercompany setup came earlier this year? I spent probably 4 months after that release wave looking at the intercompany setup and trying to figure out how to add new intercompany dimensions. And it's a very specific thing in the setup, and there was no way to do it. I could map them all, but I couldn't create new dimensions. And I just happened to be looking at that setup earlier today, and now I can. And it's clearly a difference that wasn't there even just before as I was getting ready for Summit. That particular option wasn't there. I'm like, so what are my options? Do I have to use a config pack? That's silly. I can't directly access something that used to be there.
That is funny because I think they added that it's like a big purple, when it says note, big purple, it does talk about dimensions like at the very beginning of setting up your intercompany. Yeah. So yeah, you could do it.
So we clarified within the latest release, the latest changes. I learned a new word, TLDR. It's too long, didn't read.
TLDR, too long, didn't read.
Too long, didn't read. So it just means you want like the Cliff Notes, as I would call it, to date myself. Yeah. You remember the little Cliff Note books?
Yeah.
Chris, do you remember the Cliff Note books?
Yes.
Do they still make Cliff Notes?
I think so.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
Everything's for dummies now. Right? I mean, like, everything is for dummies, I think.
I want to make a book then. Business Central for Dummies. Nobody should take my idea. Chris, let's do it.
All right.
You want in?
I want in.
I'm in. So here's the question about books for Business Central. Yeah, but it can't be paper because that's out of as soon as you publish it on paper, the product has completely changed.
I agree. It has to be PDF, digital, but we can do a digital version.
It's got to be digital. And then someone's got to be responsible for version control. I mean, I'm in. Let's do it.
So what's the TLDR for what's new for the intercompany transaction? But then I want to go back to what Chris started talking about on the intercompany transactions as well.
What is the TLDR? They're making it easier for you to use intercompany, period. Like that's
the real TLDR.
That's the real
what
TLDR.
Was added? We added the ability to post intercompany transactions across tenants or environments.
Across tenants and environments.
We added, if I heard here correctly, approvals to journals.
Approvals to journals.
We added dimensions.
A whole new setup experience is really what it gets to with this synchronization.
Mm-hmm. We added a whole new setup experience.
Yes.
Wait, hold on. Say it again.
A whole new setup experience.
The sound didn't work. Jesus. It's probably going to go off in like 10 minutes from now.
So that you can repeat it back.
No, it'll go off. Okay. So that's what's new in 2023 Wave 2. Chris started talking about what's the TLDR and what an intercompany transaction is. You talked about a workflow, and I would like to get into which types of transactions you can process through intercompany. But in short, what is the benefit of an intercompany transaction? In your words, you may have already answered it with what you talked about with your scenario, but I'm looking for the TLDR.
Well, I would say that the benefit of intercompany transactions is the reduced keystrokes, right? Just faster and more efficient and accurate data entry between multiple companies.
Okay. So I could create a purchase order from another entity or to another entity, and it would automatically create a sales order in their system for me. And then when they ship that, it would automatically create a receipt in my system?
No. So it's actually interesting that you talk about the sales and purchase functionality.
But I want to get into the other things that you can do intercompany too, but I wanted to go with what you spoke about earlier.
Because there is some improvement in that cycle that they could do within the intercompany functionality. So a purchase order will create a sales order. The invoice of the sales order, creating a posted sales invoice, will create a purchase invoice then in the other entity. It does not receive it And in fact, you'll get a message when you open up that purchase invoice, if you've done a purchase order, that says there's already a purchase order for this, you should just go delete that. So like it ignores the fact that people may have warehousing in play, and may actually have warehousing requirements. And specifically, like when we implement Business Central, not related to Intercompany, I always utilize the purchase invoice process for all invoicing where you get receipt lines. So you're separating those two activities. And you really can't do that with the Intercompany functionality, because it literally tells you to go delete the purchase order, and you can't really have warehousing in play if you're going to do that.
So are you saying or suggesting that if you're using warehousing to not use Intercompany for purchase documents?
No, you just have to build a different process for Intercompany than for other, which the long-term hope would be that you can treat them the same, right?
Okay, so that's a consideration you need to be aware of through your setup, is if you're using warehousing.
Yeah.
Okay. So it will create the sales order. I create the shipment. It will create an invoice. Tell me to go delete the purchase order.
Yeah.
If I need to receive it through warehousing, then I would need to do something different.
Yeah. So like in the past, what I've suggested people do is do the receipt, right? And then you have this purchase invoice that still needs to be processed. Technically, you can delete the lines that are in there. It still retains all of the header information and the core piece of information. Delete the lines that are in there, and then go ahead and pull in the receipt lines just like you would for any other process. The risk there is that the receipt lines come in at a different value, and you haven't captured that the invoice amount is different. So it's that aspect too that like needs to be tightened up within the functionality.
I think there's some improvement that needs to be there. I think you should put a BC idea on that and see if it gets upvoted, if there's not already one there.
You talking about BC ideas really quick? I think that was one of the reasons why that they've put time and effort against Intercompany since a decade long, is because of BC ideas. It gives them an opportunity for anybody to give feedback. Before you couldn't do that, right? So that's why it was stagnant for so long, until BC ideas was accessible.
I think that makes a lot of sense because it was underutilized to begin with, because there wasn't a lot of experience out there in using it, at least in the US, right? So there very likely could have been more expertise and experience outside of the US. But so it's slowly over the years, intercompany, multi-company consolidations and multi-currency actually are all kind of areas that have increased over the past few years of people being interested in it and utilizing it. So we're now starting to see, like, there's an exchange rate change as well in Release Wave 2, which is something that was long needed, but the US-based customer base didn't often use multi-currency. So
what was that change? And I think you were correct. I'm going to see if you can remember my question. The product has grown in usership. Therefore, there's exposure to different types of companies and larger companies, both domestic and abroad, where a lot of this functionality now needs to be worked on or improved. I mean, it was great for the user base that we had. So you brought in another one. You did a sneak attack here. You brought in another change. We're still going back to the intercompany.
But the FX change, actually, it gives you more ability during the adjust exchange rate process. Previously, it was just a process that you would run and it would post. Now you can preview it, so you can review it before it actually posts. And you can also make a decision on how or if that transaction gets dimensions on it. In the past, you were forced to just what the system had and it wouldn't pull in the dimensions for the transactions. And if you think about, like, most people have departments as dimensions, and probably FX all goes into the G&A department, but they had no way of doing that without utilizing a reclass journal or fixing the dimensions on the transaction. So now you have more control over it.
And a few versions ago, they added the ability to change dimensions on posted GL entries. This may
only on GL entries, not on the documents, but
I could understand for the financial reporting
Yeah.
aspect of it. It's very difficult to go back to the documents because the way the journal entries can be consolidated on the lines. I think going
Yeah, for
back,
sure.
you'd have to make sure that you had a 1-for-1 in that case if you wanted to do it. Wow.
Yeah.
See, we should talk to you more about the financial aspect of Business Central because
I have so many things that I can talk about. But back to Intercompany.
Yes, I want to bring it back to Intercompany where we started this journey. You
Yes.
talked about exchanging sales, purchase
Yep.
orders to sales
Yep.
orders to purchase invoices from the sales invoices. What other, I can't even speak now.
Types of transactions.
Yes. Is it what other or which other? There's a grammar lesson for everybody.
I'm unsure. Grammar is not my...
Chris GPT?
I have no idea.
Chris GPT.
English is my second language, so I'm trying to get by.
So I do want to point out there are two other types of transactions that I like to talk about as it relates to intercompany. And there is a distinction between the customer vendor function of like purchase and sales, the traditional trade process. That flows through intercompany in one way, and then the other two flow through in a different way. And what I mean by that is the sales and purchase process flows through customers and vendors. So they show up on your aging. Everything follows like the normal processes for sales and purchasing. So then the second thing, which most people know about, is the intercompany journals. Maybe I found that I need to allocate an expense that I didn't originally, so I can do a journal entry to
Which
move
kind of
that
journals? Can you only do
An
general
intercompany
journals?
journal. No,
Well, can you
good
only? Is it
question.
only general journals? Does the item
No,
journals?
it's actually
sales
its own
journals?
journal. It's an intercompany journal. Yeah, it's its own area, and the reason it's its own area is because you have to select the intercompany partner to push it to.
But you're posting GL transactions only.
You're posting GL transactions. I mean, face it, every journal is a general journal. It's just got a different face on it.
You're correct. But
Yes.
a sales journal, well, no, you're right. They all just have different. I mean, it depends.
the difference is the
It's
source
data
code.
driven.
Yes.
The data drives if it hits the subsidiary ledger or not.
Yes.
Not the journal name.
Correct. The source code is one major difference, and then the journals actually do behave differently depending on the type of journal that you're doing. There's rules that it will or won't let you do certain things depending on the type of journal that you're doing. So like you can't always select employee in a journal, for example, because of the type of journal it is. So it is an intercompany journal. In which you're selecting the intercompany partner that you're wanting to push that transaction to. And then you're also alleviating whatever journal, whatever GL account that you need to pull that out of. Or vice versa. I mean, you might be adding it, but that would be silly. Usually it's somebody is taking some of their cost and pushing it down. Right?
Yeah.
So that is an intercompany journal. It starts and ends as a journal. And that's important to note that is an action that starts and ends as a journal. And that flows through just a GL account. So on the intercompany partner, you're identifying where that flows through your GL.
Got it.
So no customer vendor ledger activity.
There's so much to this.
There's so much to it.
And I just remember back in the days where you had to have a file system to drop the intercompany transactions to process to pick them up.
Then third. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
More.
There's more.
How many more?
This is just one more.
Okay.
This is the least used because I think people just don't realize that it's there, and it's what I like to call chargebacks. There's no actual name for it, but I like to call it chargebacks. So the scenario here is perhaps you have a parent company who has the cellular account for all companies, meaning all cell phones get charged to one company. So the most common type of example that people could understand. I need to bill all of those related parties their value of that invoice. Now, I could just do a journal entry through the intercompany journals. I also can do it directly on the purchase invoice. So rather than doing a two-step process, when I process the purchase invoice, I can determine and define right on that invoice who that charge needs to be posted to, which goes through a journal, which is why I said intercompany journals both start and end as journals. But what I like to call chargebacks start as a purchase invoice to your third-party vendor and end as journals to your intercompany partner. And those also just go through those GL accounts. There's no customer or vendor ledger activity related to the intercompany transaction.
See, Chris, this is what I keep saying, is it's very important to stay up to date with what happens with the development of the application, because these changes are fired in. And if somebody had worked with intercompany transactions months ago, they would have said none of this was possible. Well,
that functionality
ago.
has been there. That functionality has not changed. Like those three methods of doing intercompany have existed since I've been using the product.
See?
They've just continued to get easier.
Okay. So the ease of doing all of these,
yes,
no one would know about. I just try to advocate or push everybody to stay up to date and aware of what works with the application, because from my perspective, I like to see less modifications where this functionality already exists, because I see a lot of modifications pop up that someone feels that the application doesn't do it when it already does it, creating unnecessary modifications.
It's interesting because in my life as an end user, we actually did still have to modify that process. The reason being that when it created the journal to the partner, the description of the transaction was not the description from the invoice. It was like their own partner name. So like you lost details in it. So we had to modify for it. So again, there's still a lot of room for improvement in there, because today you still get a description on those transactions in the chargeback scenario that are useless to the receiving end. If it's not the same team of people that are doing both sets of books, the receiver of that wouldn't necessarily know what they're getting charged for.
I know who I'm calling the next time I need an intercompany transaction set up.
Chris. Of course. Well, Chris is recording this, right? So now we know.
I'll use that as a reference.
Yeah. You have this.
No, that's great. Well, there's a lot to intercompany transactions, and again, now seeing what was added to it is you talked about the functionality that has always been there, or has been there for a decade, as Chris refers to it, as you refer to it, and they've made it easier for the processing.
Yeah.
But you've also uncovered or revealed a lot of the functionality that many may not know about.
Mm-hmm. It is a hugely underutilized functionality within the system.
Do you think it's, from your experience or from what you know, do you think it's underutilized because individuals are unaware of the functionality or the need within a business?
I think it is more that they are unaware.
That's true, because there's a lot of organizations that have multi entities, and they're doing it manually. And it's because they're unaware of the functionality. They just keep going the manual process until they speak to someone that knows about it, like Amanda. Say, why are you doing it this way? You should do it this way.
It's Amanda.
I do think that there is some aspect of it that is like the level of need, right? Because if I'm doing one transaction a month, maybe I don't care to set up all of the intercompany functionality. But as the need for that grows, then I definitely think it's still a lack of knowledge that the functionality exists more than anything. And then keep in mind that, like, if you tie in currency to this, which in a lot of cases, currency is something that needs to be considered cross cross companies. Like a lot of people also don't understand fully the true capacity of the system for currency transactions and things like that. So they might not realize that you have a GBP company and a USD company, that they can still use the intercompany functionality between the two of them, even though they're both on different currencies and things like that as well.
I do have a question about intercompany that, again, I don't set this up all the time. What's this inbox outbox thing? Like, what is that? I'm
Yeah.
a little confusing.
So it's getting to be a little bit a thing of the past, the inbox and the outbox. So previously, all transactions stopped and started in the inbox and the outbox. So if I created that purchase order in our scenario before that needed to create a sales order for my partner, in the past, without the auto send and auto accept, it went to the intercompany outbox. And someone would have to use the intercompany outbox and send it to the partner. And then that receiving partner would have to go to their intercompany inbox, validate it, accept it, and then process it. And then it would create the sales order. So I think we'll see potentially that go away, or at least the use of it decrease with the auto accept and the auto send. However, it should still be monitored, because at this point, if there's something wrong with the document or the transaction, even if you have auto accept on, it will get stuck.
I see. So on average, when you're setting up intercompany, how much of a return is it when you set this up properly in someone's organization? Like time wise, like what do you see in average?
What's the return on investment?
Yeah.
What's the return on investment? I've never calculated it, but I would say it's going to increase exponentially based on the number of transactions that the companies are doing between each other, right? Because even just in that sales process, a purchase order, a sales order, which becomes a sales invoice, so that's maybe the same transaction, but then a purchase invoice. So there's at least 3 transactions that need to occur. So I now can do it with one, right? I still have to post, but the review of that is much faster. And let's say it's a 50-line order. That's a lot of data entry that I'm saving. So the number of documents and then the number of lines within a document is just going to increase that exponentially.
Wow. So people really should consider if they have
People
high
should
volume.
really consider it. Yes. So in my past life, I worked for an adhesive manufacturer and distributor, and there was a lot of intercompany activity.
You keep saying
between
past
them.
life. Are you reincarnated
Past
or
life.
something?
No, haven't you ever heard that? This is what people say when they talk about their old jobs.
Oh, so
that's your
life
past
is your
life.
job, or your job is your life.
And my
so
previous
you have a past
job.
life.
Okay, in my previous job.
I was just wondering
Yeah.
if you followed some sort of belief that you were reincarnated or not. That's okay. If you did,
no,
I had some questions on that too. But I can ask questions about any topic. You throw a topic up,
You
I'll come up with a
absolutely
question.
can. I'm talking about a previous job.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
They would do a lot of actual trade transactions with each other, right? And so every single one of those was more effort to enter if they were doing it manually than actually entering them through the intercompany process.
And now in her present life, she assists organizations implement intercompany transactions among many other Business Central processes and setup.
Yes.
Which is great. I like saying which is great. Well, Amanda, it's been an enlightening episode. I think I'll have to listen to it more than I listen to these episodes to make sure I digest it all. But I do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and clarify that what was new, which was just a small piece of intercompany processing. I almost wanted to get into it, but maybe we can talk about it another day. I'll catch up with you on that. I have an idea. How to set up intercompany processing.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
So that's another topic that I want to talk with you about. But in the meantime, how can anybody who's listening or viewing get in contact with you for more information about roller derby, intercompany transactions, becoming an all-star, becoming a legend, or becoming an MVP?
Yeah. So as anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's the easiest. It's the easiest way to get without having to remember anything, just typing in my name. Otherwise, if they want to email me, I'm happy to take emails directly as well. My email is amanda.mayer@lidd.com. So, and Mayer is how you spell it. But both methods are good. Like, let me know that you heard me on the podcast. So I don't think you're someone just, trying to offer me a job just because. I mean, you can do that too, but I'm pretty happy where I am.
And if you mention you heard her on the podcast, she'll give you a discount.
I did not agree to that, but we'll see.
Well, it may work well for you.
It may work well. I'll have to get that approved by the higher ups, but
we can talk. We can have them on the podcast too to talk about the advantages.
Have them on the podcast.
To talk about the advantages of giving a discount for people who reference the podcast on the consulting services. See, Chris, it's a new thing we can start.
I know, but we don't get proceeds or anything.
No,
it's
we
all
don't.
for fun.
I never would. I do not want any proceeds of anything. We do this for the love of the community. So, as Chris said, it's.
I would love to speak more on lots of things. So anytime you want, my lovely derby pictures in the background, we can talk about a lot of things: finance, accounting, multi-company, multi-currency.
You'll be a regular.
We can have you. No, we will connect to talk about some of these other types of episodes that we can have. And we appreciate it. Again, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks.
All right. Ciao, ciao.
Cheers.
Thank you, Chris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.